Songwriting partnership with Paul McCartney is unparalleled in the history of rock and roll. It is a very big deal to Beatles fans all over the world, and it may come as no surprise that it is, in fact, a big deal to me too. When Paul and I got together to talk about Dad, we spoke about many things I'd never heard before. I began by asking him when it was that he realized Dad was a special guy.
Yeah, well, the funny thing about your dad was that I'd seen him around a couple of times because I realized later what it was my bus route. He would take that bus, but he would be going to see his mum, who lived kind of in my area, and then he'd take the bus back up to his auntie, Mimi's. So I'd seen him a couple of times and thought, wow, he's an interesting looking guy, and then I once also saw him in a queue for fish and chips. And I said, oh, that's that guy off the bus. I'm talking to myself. In my mind, I thought, that's that guy off the bus. He is pretty cool looking. Yeah, he's a cool guy.
And did you know he was a musician already at that point?
No, I knew nothing about him except that he looked pretty cool. He had long sideboards and a bit of greased back hair and everything,
Was that the teddy boy kind of look at the time?
Yeah, exactly. It was the teddy boy look, yeah.
Was that your look as well then, or were you more of a rocker?
Yeah, I think all of us were trying to do a bit of that at that point, so if you ever noticed anyone who was trying to do it, you thought, oh yeah, I'd probably get on well with him. But I didn't know anything about him, and I didn't know who he was, except that I'd seen him on the bus and I'd seen him in the fish and chip shop. But then my friend Ivan, who I knew at school, was a friend of John's and took me up to the Village Fete and introduced me there. So it was like, oh, that's that guy who I've been seeing. And then obviously I knew he was a musician because he was in the little band, the Quarrymen. And I got to sort of hang with them in the interval.
And they were sort of ragtag, right? I mean, we're talking about no guitar amplifiers, kind of a skiffle washboard thing.
No, it was very pre-rock and roll. It was, there'd been the old-fashioned kind of music, which was my dad's music, some of which I liked and, enjoyed. And then there'd been skiffle, which kind of broke it open. This was a kind of new kind of music to us. It was like bluesy, folksy, but you only had to have an acoustic guitar. You didn't need much equipment. And for the bass, they used to use a tea chest. We used to come in, all the tea came in it from India or somewhere. And you had a broomstick on the top and a string. You go, doop, doop. So their group was pretty basic, little acoustic-y kind of thing.
Was it good, though? I mean, did you think they sounded good?
I thought John was good. I thought the group, it wasn't that good. I didn't think they were bad.
But you knew because your dad played trumpet and you actually sort of had more of a real musical family in a way. I mean, right? You were more exposed to jazz.
I was lucky. My dad played music around the house a lot. And it was a very musical family. I was in all the big family sing-songs at New Year's, were quite huge occasions. And, the funny thing about this was that I thought everyone had families like mine, who were just sort of ordinary and just, all seemed to like each other or visited each other and sang and played the piano and stuff. And it was only later when I realized, probably through your dad's life,
right,
of how a difficult upbringing he'd had compared to me.
My grandmother Julia did play banjo and ukulele. Do you remember what she was like? Because I've actually never really spoken to anyone about my grandmother who actually met her in person before. What was she like?
This is one of the sadnesses about life, that you would have just loved her. She was a doll. She was just a very cool lady. She had long red hair and she was very spirited and she would, she would sort of joke and stuff. And she did play a little banjo thing, and she taught John some chords. So when I met him, he used to play these kind of banjo chords, and so we had to swap it round to guitar. But she was lovely, and he idolized her. And it was so sad that he wasn't living with her and his half-sisters. But yeah, she was a terrific lady, a lot of fun, and we'd go round to their little council house, which was in the area where I lived, which was not quite as well off as the people up on the hill where John lived.
Right, he was in Menlove Avenue or something?
He was in Menlove Avenue, and I was off an avenue called Mather Avenue.
Posh, kind of relatively posh, right?
Compared to the rest of us in the Beatles, he was the posh one.
That's so funny, because people didn't really think of it that way, I think, early on, did they?
Exactly. Well, and all the working class hero and all that, No, so John would come down, visit me, and then we'd walk, a mile or two down to where Julia's house was. And we would just do a visit. It was in a little line of terraces. It was a little council house, very modest. And we'd just have a visit. So, she'd make us a cup of tea and a sandwich and stuff. And we'd sit around chatting and stuff. And it was very obvious to me that John absolutely loved her and she absolutely loved him. So, as I say, she was fun. She was really ready with a joke. She was witty, and I suspect that's where he got a lot of his wit from.
And was Julia, she knew you guys were starting a band, was she supportive of it, or was it, and what about your dad? I mean, were the parents into it, or were they thinking it was a bit of a waste of time?
Yeah, I think she thought it was a fun idea, because she was a bit of a musician herself. So, and my dad was the other one who had actually been a musician in a little band. So he was super supportive, and we would go around there to rehearse. But sometimes we'd take our guitars round to Julia's and sort of play a little something, and she loved it. She was very supportive.
I always got the impression that Dad felt, and maybe expressed in different ways over the years, that somehow he wasn't officially a true musician or something, and that everyone else was. I mean, was there that kind of feeling that he thought, I'm not a real musician?
I don't think any of us were, tell you the truth. And I think that was a very good, strong thing about us, actually, funnily enough. We all had to learn together. So the nearest to John feeling like he wasn't a true musician could have been that, in the skiffle craze, when everyone else is playing guitar chords, he only knew a couple of banjo chords. But that only lasted, a week or two. And I would just show him chords I knew, which was very basic. But it was great bonding, just learning chords off each other. And I think the minute he knew those chords, he was as good as anyone. And he might have had a little bit of a hang-up about not being a sort of musically trained, but none of us were. And I think that was one of the strengths of the Beatles, that none of us knew what we were doing. So we had to discover the route for ourselves, and each of us discovered it together at the same time. So that was lovely. It meant that when we came to record or play live, we all were new at it, and we all learned at the same speed. Which I think when we came to record with George Martin later on, meant that John and I could bring in a song and just play it. There's anything that you want. Kind of, oh, wait a minute, let me take those chords down. It was like, no, we'd grown up together, so we just read each other.
I remember the story of you learning B7 or something, and that was sort of a big breakthrough. That was
a breakthrough, major breakthrough. Now, it was well, it's a kind of slightly complicated chord in that set of chords, because, A, A and E. They're not too bad.
But you can't really play the blues if you don't also have that last chord, can you?
You got to have that last chord, you know. So it was true. I mean, it's a distant memory for me now, and I've told the story so many times I'm beginning to think it's not true. But it is true that we actually did go on a bus to some guy's house who somebody had said, "Oh no, this guy's good. He knows B7," and we went and we learned it off him, you know. It was kind of good that we didn't know too much, because you had to just say, "Oh, it's this chord," and show him this chord. Yeah, okay. And even with this complicated timings in things, I don't like "Here Comes the Sun," you know, with this who was more sophisticated than the other or whatever. And there maybe is some truth that musically I had an edge because my dad had shown us some things, and I'd learned the guitar chords a bit before John. But it wasn't so much that, the sophistication, it was attitudes. So my attitude would be, this is what I want to do. And then John would bring another edge to it. So what was the great thing was the combination of those two attitudes. You know, and I look back on it now like a fan. You know, I think, wow, you know, how lucky was I to meet this strange teddy boy off the bus who turned out to play music like I did, and we get together, and boy, we complemented each other. You know, it was a bit yin-yang. You know, they say with marriages, opposites attract. And I think, I mean, we weren't like madly opposite, but I had some stuff he didn't have, and he had some stuff I didn't have. So when you put them together, it made something extra.
It really did. I mean, when I look at you guys, just, you know, as a fan myself, when you wrote yesterday, it just seems like a real, like a comet from outer space. It's just kind of, it's really like a breakthrough for you guys musically. Do you remember? I also always felt that might be true, or I've heard that was true of my dad writing Strawberry Fields. Do you remember feeling anything special about him writing that or playing it for you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, it's funny. I heard it on the radio coming in this morning.
Really?
Yeah, I thought, this is a sign. The time I was there, it had been closed down. And John would say, "Oh, look, you know, this is Strawberry Fields, and there's, you know, used to be old kids playing in there and stuff." So when we came to get the song together, John, it was essentially John's song, and he sort of brought it in. But it was such a lovely piece, and I think very ahead of its time with all the lyrics. You know, I think, yes, I don't, maybe, hello. And I know I had one of his first LPs at home before the Beatles. You know, I used to play that quite a lot, so I was steeped in him, and I think your dad was too. So, but that was just one of the influences. You know, there's an awful lot more, because Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, those are very much us remembering our youth. And, you know, it's a funny thing we used to say when we were a little older, like 20-something.
Yeah, you were really young.
Which look like babies, you know, but we thought we were kind of men of the universe, big men by then. You know, it's, as we got a little bit older, if ever there was like a problem with a song or recording, we'd often say, what would our 17-year-old self think? And we like refer back, because that was the wisest age, we reckoned. You know, if it's 17, you go, nah, it's a load of crap.
Right, you had it all figured out.
That's great, needs more drums, or, you know, just very basic thinking. It was a whole very exciting time. And I say, with Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, there, you know, if I'd say Penny Lane and talk about the barbershop. Penny Lane.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but I've had little glimpses of some of the studio banter from the Let It Be period, and it just made me think, like, wow, you know, growing up, there was always this myth that, you know, things were a bit grumpy or whatever. And there was this kind of like, there was this mythos around the film and everything. But actually what surprised me, you know, was that you guys then and throughout your career just always seemed to actually be having so much fun. Like, it was very lighthearted and you guys are joking around and enjoying yourselves, I think. Is that true? Like, do you think it was a bit of a myth, and that looking back, do you feel like, do you notice how much more fun it seemed or something? Because I remember seeing in an interview with you saying...
I think it was the fact that the Beatles were breaking up, which was a very difficult time for us. It was like a divorce, you know. So it's very difficult to collect your thoughts and to just be jolly. And by the time Let It Be came about, that became the story of the film. And then that, coupled with the fact that we'd broken up, left it a gloomy, left a sort of cloud in the room, you know?
Saying that you saw a picture of you guys at the, I think it's from the Let It Be session, and you just are obviously so close, like you're writing some song together, and that reminded you.
That was a picture Linda had taken. It really gave me hope, that picture. Before the Peter Jackson thing, that was like one little picture I held on to. In fact, we had an exhibition where Linda's pictures were blown up, and I bought one of them. And it's a great big one of that thing you're talking about, me and John writing. And you can just see that we're into each other, you know, and we're like smiling and we're writing down something. So we're engaged in doing something artistic, something interesting. And I say, you know, that every time I felt a bit down, I would look at that picture and go, no, that's the reality. And so I'm loving the fact that Peter Jackson discovered more of that reality.
I'm excited about it. And you guys famously, you know, started writing, I guess, more and more independently as the records progressed. But was there still a kind of input or influence happening anyway, would you say?
I think so. You know, the reason we originally wrote separately was because we were living separately. In the early days, we'd been on tour all the time, so we were kind of living together. Once the touring eased off, and we might have one tour a year or something, there would be plenty of time to be at home. And so you'd pick up a guitar or something, and let's say I wrote Yesterday or something like that. John would write Strawberry Fields. So you were writing separately, then you bring it together for the record. So you would then get some collaboration to finish up the song and to bring it in to the studio, and then you collaborate in the studio. But the interesting thing is that ever since the Beatles broke up and we didn't write together or even record together, I think each one of us referenced the others when we're writing stuff. I often do it, you know. I'm writing something and I go, oh God, this is bloody awful, you know. And I think, what would John say? And you go, yeah, you're right. It's bloody awful. You've got to change it. And so I'll change it, you know. And I know from reports that he did similar things to that. You know, if I'd have a record out, he'd go, oh, bloody hell, you know, got to go in the studio, got to try and do better than Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I always felt like even on Imagine, he has that song that's just How ?
How can I go forward when I don't know which way I'm facing?
There's this one chord in it that's sort of, I guess, I don't know what key, but it's when you play like a C major over D on the bass. And it's a kind of like a jazzier sound. And I always felt like that was something that he would have been more influenced by your ears for. Like, it sounds to me that he was paying attention to you, you know, throughout his career, to me. But I don't know. I mean, I can't ask him, but it seems that way if I just listen, you know, to the chords and melodies. He seemed aware of what you were doing. I mean, you even seemed still to be a bit in sync. I listened to your first solo album, McCartney, and his Plastic Ono Band. In a way, what they are connected to me. Maybe I'm stretching, but they're connected because they're both so raw and stripped down in a way. And I feel like they don't sound like the Beatles in a similar way, in the way that they're more kind of bare. And I really love them both, but it seems like you hadn't completely drifted apart necessarily. Like there was still a kind of, you're on the same page to me.
Yeah, well, you know, if you know someone that long, from your early teenage years to your late 20s, right. That's an awful long time to be collaborating with someone. And you grow to know each other. And even when you're apart, you're still thinking about each other, you're still referencing each other. So I like to think that. I always say to people, one of the great things for me was that after all the Beatles rubbish and all the arguing and the business, you know, business differences really, that even after all of that, I'm so happy that I got it back together with your dad. It really, really would have been a heartache to me if we hadn't have reunited. It was so lovely that we did, and you know, it really gives me sort of strength to know that, you know.
Yeah, well, that you kind of touch base again. I mean, even I've seen interviews with him around the time when he's about to go and see you, and he seems really genuinely happy that he's about to see you. I think he says like, well, actually, I'm about to have a meeting with him. Paul, I'm on my way or something. And he kind of jokes, but he sounds happy that he's going to see you. You know, I can tell that you guys were real friends.
I think so much of what he did, you know, just obviously Imagine and Instant Karma, you know, it's great. And the nice thing was when I listened to the records, I could imagine him in the studio and go, oh, okay, I know what he's done. He's just said to the engineer, give me some Elvis echo.
Right, the slap.
Bog echo.
Yeah.
Bog is the toilet in Liverpool. But, you know, we just called it a bog echo. It's really a tape delay. But I can imagine him saying, I want that, and then getting in the headphones with that and recording a lot of his stuff that way.
I also heard that he was kind of insecure about his voice. Like, I've heard that, you know, when he was doing the solo records, he would kind of turn his vocal down, and then he'd go to the bathroom and come back, and the engineers would have like snuck it back up. It's just funny that he had these sort of insecurities, although he also came across as very confident, didn't he? Yeah,
exactly. Well, the confidence was a shield. You know, that I learned that early on, was that if you have difficulties in your life, you can kind of go two ways. You can just lie down and give up, or you can put a shield up and you can guard yourself from the world in that way. So from the minute I met John, you know, I knew that was what was going on, was that he had this wit that would, you know, guard him from that. And so the thing is, you know, insecurities, I think so many people, I can't think of anyone who doesn't have insecurities. So I can relate to that, and I'm sure John would not think it was great enough. I remember doing the vocal on Eleanor Rigby and saying to George Martin, God, this is terrible. Oh, I'm terrible. I listen to it now, I go, oh, no, it's pretty good. I like it. You know.
It's pretty good, yeah. It's okay.
But, you know, we're all full of insecurities. And then, you know, like you say, if you look at it rationally, you go, wait a minute. There's this guy, John Lennon, who's like a genius, clever, witty, confident and everything. Why would he have insecurities? Because we're all fragile beings. And, you know, I do that with myself. I think, God, if I haven't got enough awards, why, you know, I should just look at these awards and go, yeah, you're okay. But you don't. It doesn't work out like that. You're, as an artist, I think you're always questioning it, thinking, I could do this better, or could I? And then sometimes you'll just hear it and go, oh, no, it's okay. But, you know, I think we were all a bit like that.
How did you guys decide to even be songwriters? Because I thought, generally most groups would not necessarily write their own material. Was it Buddy Holly who really started that?
You know, it was independent of all of that. I'd started just when I got a guitar, my natural instinct was to sort of try and learn songs that I liked, little blues songs, or, skiffle songs. But beyond that, I tried to write little things myself. And it turns out so did John. So what I would do is I was just talking to someone about myself, and they said, what are your hobbies? Go, oh, I don't know, I love drawing, and I like song writing. I try and write songs. And instead of these days where someone might go, oh, you do? Well, that's interesting. People would go, oh, yeah, okay. Do you like football? And no one would pick up on that songwriting thing until I met John. And then I said, well, I've written a couple of songs. He said, so have I. So we had just independently, having our guitars, it had struck us as a good idea to try and do something of our own. And they were pretty basic little songs. But when we got together, we used to go around to my house, and we'd play these songs. And we had that really just before Buddy. And then when Buddy came along, the Everleys came along, we took a lot of their style and put them into our style. But we had actually started to flirt with songwriting independent of one another, without major influences, just the fact that it was a guitar, we loved this new kind of music, and so we were having a go at it.
You wrote Love Me Do before the Beatles?
Yeah, we did that. We did a few before the Beatles, really, yeah. Love Me Do, one after 909.
Did you have any throwaway songs that you don't like, that were sort of bad, or was it kind of like you just struck gold from the beginning?
Yeah, no, there were a few songs that weren't very good.
Well, that's nice to hear, actually, honestly.
There were a few that were,
thank God,
clearly young songwriters who don't quite know how to do it. There was one called Just Fun. How'd it go? What do you mean? I've got my guitar here. It's like they say that our love is just fun. The day that our friendship begun. Well, there's no blue moon that I can see. There's never been in history, because our love was just fun. Okay, Just Fun. So,
wow, that sounds almost like a country song.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of country influence in our early stuff, yeah. But so eventually we started to write slightly better songs, and then enjoyed the process of learning together so much that it really took off and became the huge success that was the Beatles.
For sure. But there's a lot of bands that were successful and great, but you guys especially seem to always evolve and grow kind of exponentially. If I look at, the history from the first album all the way through to Abbey Road and Let It Be, and then you wound up, going on to write an oratorio and all this stuff. Like, where did you guys get this kind of unique drive to just keep expanding? When I listen to Because and I Want You, She's So Heavy, it seems like even by the end of the Beatles, my dad was still sort of expanding his ability. Like, where did that come from? Because not everyone of that generation did the same thing.
Okay, number one, we were good. Right there. Number two, we'd grown up together. From little kids, we'd taken the first steps together. We'd kind of learned to walk together. Then we learned to run. And the fact that each of us was influencing the other was very important, and we were learning not just about songs and stuff, about life. We'd come down from Liverpool to London, and so we were seeing the London scene together, even though we weren't living together. We would talk about it all, and the same influences, and we'd maybe go to the same clubs, and we'd do this and do that. And And so all those influences were always there. And the fact that we'd come along this journey together meant that, hey, we're just going to continue. And who knows, we might get better. And so we did, you know, and if I did something that was a little bit ahead of the curve, then John would come up with something that was a bit ahead of my curve. And then so I'd go, well, how about this? And, you know, there was a lot of friendly competition.
Do you feel like you guys absorbed each other in a way that the other person influenced you to become who you wound up being as an artist?
Yeah, I do, yeah, really, very much so. And as you say, who knows? I mean, I was looking at being a school teacher, you know, and I don't know what John was looking at. I mean, maybe an artist or something, I don't know. And I think we rescued each other.
Having said that, like, are there any solo records of Dad's that you kind of remember thinking like, oh, he's doing a good job with that? Like, I imagine you would have liked Mind Games, the song or something, but that's just in my head, or Number 9 Dream. Are there any songs or records that you remember being a fan of his when he was going solo?
Yeah, I mean, I'm often asked for my favorite tunes kind of thing. And I always include Beautiful Boy.
Must have learned from you, because you have a major 6 at the beginning of Fool on the Hill, and I think you did a 6 before he did one. I always think that
I invented the major 6.
you invented the major 6 chord.
No, you know, I love it. I love what I do. I say happy birthday, John. You're a lovely, lovely boy, and it's great speaking to you, Sean, who's also a lovely boy.
Thank you.
On this occasion, it's great, man.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. It's been really fun, especially hearing about Dad and hearing about my grandma too. Is nice.